Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Henry Confidential, and look at what we have here, a horror podcast. John, introduce yourself.
I'm John Marr. I love horror. I don't dress like other horror folks. You won't see me. This is what you get. But I do know a lot about horror, and I know Henry is a newer fan to the scene.
Yep.
He's getting more into it, so that's what this kind of got birthed out of. There's a lot of people that watch horror, casually. There's a lot of people watch horror seriously. So we hope to appeal to both of those groups in this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those where, like you said, I would say it's been a couple years now at this point, but like my longevity and my general history with horror movies and just pop culture and stuff like that doesn't extend as far back as obviously you, both age-wise, but also general horror fan experience. But it's one of those where once I became a fan, I've been hooked in terms of like I just like a lot of things that horror movies have to say. So I think we'll definitely differ in terms of long term and with old school horror tropes and styles and the new quote unquote elevated horror that gets mentioned in Scream, the new one. I think that's funny because I just had that in the background as I was waiting for you to pop up on here. So what we're gonna do every episode is we are going to talk about a mainstream horror and a similar style themes whatever niche horror, so a more low-key horror film that might appeal. Essentially we just want to get the name out there, or more than likely John wants to get its name out there, and then we're and then we'll talk about either a very new release or a recent release, like in this case something that has been out for a couple weeks but it's more relevant, it's more well known in terms of it's topical. So with that said, we're going to start with our mainstream movie. And you before we introduce the niche one, you started off with the niche one, so I matched the mainstream one, and your niche one is a vampire flick, which it's one of those unfortunate things that you don't really know that going into that, so it's kind of ironic that I went in knowing that because of the themes of this. But so I decided what do I want to talk about slash also revisits and essentially talk about, because I haven't actually been able to talk about it. So I chose The Lost Boys, 1987 vampire flick, and it's one of those movies that is definitely of its time. It's not a movie that is ever going to be made today, but it's one of those where if you revisit it, you can have your own opinion based on, everyone's going to, get it in, they're going to take it in their own way. So it's got a 75% Rotten Tomato critic score, but it's got an 85% audience score. So it's one of those things where, it's got a fan base. And obviously, I know like people I follow on Letterboxd, they like the movie, and it's one of those that is, it's very well known. It even has a reference in Reservoir Dogs. I watched Lost Boys. But what are your general thoughts on The Lost Boys? How many times, if you had to guess, have you seen it? And is it one you go back to, or is it one that you watched again for this? Hit me with it.
As a kid, I got to imagine this was on TV and like syndication like every week. So I've probably seen this movie, and I had it on VHS. So I've probably seen this movie like dozens of times. And the one small thing I might disagree on is I can definitely see them remaking The Lost Boys like in a modern setting. I can definitely, there's no shame in the horror genre. They remake everything.
That's true.
I can definitely see them circling back to The Lost Boys. Maybe not anytime soon, maybe like within 5 years, I could see them redoing The Lost Boys, especially if there's like a push for more vampire movies. But I think you're also right. Like Lost Boys is basically like, it's like a time capsule of like 1987. And you have all these actors that like were iconic at the time. Like, Kiefer Sutherland is here and Corey Feldman is here. Jason Patrick is here. Alex Winter is here. Bill and Ted in a totally different role is here. Corey Haim is here. And they're all, and the funny thing is, like, Schumacher kind of let these guys be themselves. Like Corey Feldman is clearly playing himself. Kiefer Sutherland is clearly playing himself. And that's
Corey Feldman's being himself with kind of a grizzled voice that he's playing himself as a
tough guy,
wannabe vampire hunter. Tough, like you said, tough guy. So, but that's funny that you said that, because he's a teenager. He's a punk kid, but in a cool way. Like I like it.
And it also birthed that meme of the guy playing the saxophone. which most people believe just what the hell is that doing in this movie? But it's by just it being so strange. It just that scene is so iconic. That dude playing the saxophone with the fire, of course, is great.
Yeah, it's one of those, well, like you said, Joel Schumacher directed this from Batman Forever and Batman and Robin fame. Movies like Falling Down, Phone Booth. He's a director that I wouldn't say he has his own like box and his own personal niche. So people forget that he directed The Lost Boys because it's like you don't think of Joel Schumacher and you don't think of horror or especially not vampires specifically. So it's one of those where it's like that's so interesting that back in 1987 that he did this. I'm going back to the stats. On its opening weekend, this movie made $5 million, which in 1987 still probably isn't that much. It only grossed worldwide 32 million. So it's one of those where it's like, the reason I want to bring up box office for these movies is because I want to compare which types of horror movies make money and which type of eras bring in, certain genres. There's always going to be phases, like we'll notice probably in the 2000s, there's probably a phase when we cover those where it's like, wow, no matter the quality of the movie, it made money probably because people are just going crazy in the 2000s. But yeah, so The Lost Boys, it's one of those with that number, do you feel like that's a low number for 1987 or just horror in general?
I feel in 87, I got to imagine it probably, I mean, it was July 31st, 1987 it was released. I don't know what it was released against that week, but I got to imagine it probably was released against some hitters in the middle of the summer. This doesn't feel like a summer blockbuster movie in 87. That it probably got buried by something. You will probably have to look up what it opened against.
Yeah,
but yeah, given the time of year it was released and the subject matter of the movie, it really doesn't feel like you're like the movie that you're out from school. You're gonna go and watch some like Schwarzenegger or Stallone flick in the 80s. Like those are the movies that were probably grossing the money. I got to imagine this was just bad timing of releasing this movie. This would have done better probably in the fall, I would imagine.
So I looked it up just for the year base. Number one for the entire year was Beverly Hills Cop 2 at 153 million. So it made way more than that. And then Platoon at 136. So and that was the best picture winner. Lost Boys was at 33 for the entire year. So I guess it's one of those where it definitely, it's a different time of going to the movies and box office. So I guess 33rd for the entire year really isn't as bad as I kind of was thinking. So it definitely, like I said, it's a different time for films, both the horror genre, but also just in general. So that's another reason why I want to bring up the box office for that segment, because it's just showcasing the different time periods in which these movies are being seen, but also the different genres and styles that are being seen and being avoided. So generally speaking, or getting into our own personal thoughts, well, I guess yeah, I'm gonna look up where we can find the movie, and so we can recommend that to the people to make
I
sure.
believe it's on Netflix.
It is actually currently on Netflix. Great job. Yep. So yes, it is on Netflix right now. So if you haven't seen it for some reason, or if you just want to go and revisit it, because obviously we're talking about it, so it's like, oh, Lost Boys in my mind, or it's one of those where you watch it one time, you're like, it was too dated at the time, so I just wasn't in the right mindset. Give it another shot, at least formulate your own current opinion. But so
just it opened against La Bamba, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which was probably the movie everybody was going to see.
Yeah. For better or for worse.
Yeah, those were the same weekend openings as them. But yeah, Superman 4, I got to imagine, just eclipsed the Lost Boys.
Yeah, it definitely definitely kept the Lost Boys out in daytime.
Yeah.
So how many times do you think you've seen it? And like, go ahead and get into your positives with this movie.
I think this movie, the one thing that really sticks with me, because I've seen the movie so many times, I got to say I've seen it more than 20 times.
Okay.
Corey Feldman's one-liners in this movie, like, oh my God, it's the attack of Eddie Munster.
Yeah.
Oh, great, a blood-sucking Brady Bunch. Like those things I can just recall from memory.
Yeah.
And then, of course, at the end, like, one thing I couldn't stand about this town, like all the goddamn vampires. The fact that the grandfather knew all along there were vampires in the town. The kills are iconic. Like them killing the vampires, death by stereo. That's an iconic scene. Yeah. I think Kiefer Sutherland nails it as, just being a Kiefer Sutherland vampire. I think so much so that I guess, Jason Patric is the lead, I guess, in this movie, but like, you don't even really remember Jason Patric in this movie. I think everybody else kind of overshadows him in the movie. That's maybe like a little negative, but I like Diane Weiss in this movie. I liked, the guy that played Max. He's a character actor. I forget what his name is off the top of my head. Edward Herman. All's pretty good. The reveal of, Max as the lead vampire, like
Yeah.
when they're exploring the mythology of vampires.
That was definitely an interesting. I don't know if it was a shock, but it was one of those where it's like, wow, okay, I guess that's an interesting. Because it was in the comic book store, or no,
At the
was he?
house. Yeah, they're at the
No,
house.
I mean, but I mean, when we first meet him, he's the owner of the comic book store, or
He's definitely a business owner in town. I don't know if
yeah,
he owns the comic book
no, he's
store.
not. Maybe not the comic book store, but yeah, it's some sort of
He's like
convenience
a
store
chamber
or
comic book
whatever.
or something in the town.
Yeah. So yeah, it's one of those where it's like they set him up as, like a love interest and all that stuff, and then he kind of just, infiltrates the family. So yeah, it was like I said, I don't know if it was necessarily a twist, but it was like, oh, okay.
But yeah, they do a good job of explaining everything because there's that dinner scene where they think he's the vampire and they spill water on him and they make him eat garlic and like nothing works on him because they've invited him into the house and they explain all that. They do a really good job at like explaining vampire mythology in the Lost Boys, which you really don't expect in a movie like this. But they do a really good job of getting deep into.
I think that's something that probably Joel Schumacher really brought to the picture, because it's one,
Yeah.
With a lot of these movies that will go, throughout time, different directors are going to really have that stamp of what really makes a movie a throwaway horror flick and a memorable classic. For better or for worse, whether it's a cult classic or just an all timer. So I feel like The Lost Boys is more in the cult classic era, just because of it's of its time, just looks of its time, so it's going to be hard to appeal to someone outside of the fan base, and it'll
Right.
be harder to gain new fan bases, but it has a strong fan base. And it's one of those where, for me, so I'll start with my positive. My positive is Corey Feldman. Everything you said, he's just having a blast, and he's it's right before The Burbs, right after Stand By Me, so he's definitely going into that, like, different. He's clearly a growing actor, but he's not trying to put himself in a single box of like what he's doing. So like his character in Stand By Me, this, and then just 2 years later in The Burbs, where it's like he's still a teenager, you know what I mean? So he can only have so much range, but none of those three characters even feel remotely the same. So I definitely give him a lot of credit for that. It's beautiful. The score is nice. It sounds good. It has a good flow to it. It's not long by any stretch of the imagination at, an hour 37, including credits.
Yeah.
You can definitely tell, even if you don't know it's got Schumacher specifically behind the camera, or just in the director's chair, you definitely know that there's someone competent directing the movie. So it definitely has a good feel for it. So it's one of those where it's like I wasn't the biggest fan my first time I watched it. So this was my second time watching it for the show. Because at the first time I was like, I don't know how to feel about this. Like I said, it's one of those, it's definitely of its specific genre and sense of style. So at the first time, I just didn't know that going in. I kind of went in just for a vampire flick. So with this one, I knew what to expect. So when I went in, I didn't dread watching it by any stretch of imagination. I still feel, in the middle. Like, I don't love it by any means, but I can see myself just throwing this on the background, like if we're doing trivia or something, and I just have in the background just because I'll look up like, oh, look, a vampire kill, or oh, look, something funny, or you know what I mean? Like there's different layers to it that I definitely respect. So yeah, it's one of those where I probably would recommend it, like I said at the very beginning, to whether go to rewatch, pop it on your Netflix and give it a second shot if you've never seen it, or if you're like, hey, I want to get into horror. Like, I feel like this is a nice. It's not too weird to, like, if you're a brand new horror fan, or if you've never seen a horror movie, it's not like scary, and
Yeah.
it's not like too grotesque with its like kills and stuff, that I feel like it really middles that. Like, if you can handle this, then you can probably open the door for other, different elements of horror. So do you agree with that?
I think aside from like maybe a few jump scares and some makeup effects, you're right. It really isn't a scary movie. I would even say it probably even borders on a horror comedy,
Yeah.
given Feldman's performance in this movie, and even actually Corey Haim's performance too. They're trying to be, the Frog Brothers are comic relief every scene they're in. There's that whole like Home Alone feel when they're fighting the vampires. Like they literally have like water pistols filled with holy water.
Yeah.
Like, so it is goofy. There's a lot of funniness here, but I think you're right. It ticks off a lot of boxes. Like, it ticks off as like an 80s time capsule. It ticks off as a vampire movie. It ticks off as a horror comedy. And yeah, and it's just stylistic. But you're right. I think if you're trying to watch it in like the modern day lens, it loses a little bit just because it is a byproduct of its time. But that really is the only drawback. I do believe this will be remade. I got to feel it will be.
So I guess yeah, to go back what I was saying in terms of it won't be remade as a mirror image, you know what I mean? It'll be remade in its own updated
Okay.
sensibility. Like it's not going to feel like an 80s movie. So when I said yeah, when I meant it's not going to be remade in terms of it's not this movie wouldn't come out today exactly as it is. So
Yeah.
I definitely could see it coming out with more of a What We Do in the Shadow style, not as goofy and Taika Waititi style, but more along those lines of fun and self-aware, but also throw in some scares, kind of like a Shaun of the Dead, where it's like the horror in that movie actually kind of has some horror, legit horror sense to it, but it's only like 1-2% of the movie. And I feel
Right.
like this would probably cover some of that, maybe bump it up to like 5-10%, but I feel like it would be more along those lines, and I would be cool.
That's a good comparison because Shaun of the Dead is the same way scary. A few jump scares, a few
Yep.
makeup effects, but otherwise not really scary and like really leaning into the funny, kind of like Lost Boys does too. I think that's a good comparison.
Yeah, so I guess that is interesting. So if you're a fan of Shaun of the Dead, by no means is it the same in terms of anything other than the fact of the genre that it definitely covers that where it's like Lost Boys, Evil Dead 2, and Shaun of the Dead would be a very interesting triple feature to say the least. So
It would be.
for like horror comedies of going into the gore range, I feel like all three of them having a little bit of blood and some creepy weird stuff going for it. So yeah. So what do you have any negatives? So it sounds like you really like this movie. Do you have anything that you agree is not doesn't hold up as well, or has always kind of been a source, a thorn in your side?
I mean, just nostalgia alone, it's hard for me to like say anything negative about it. But you're right; it is like it's campy. It's specific to its time. It doesn't really hold up. I think a kid watching it today isn't to think it's an old movie. If it was remade today, it would feel more like probably like more like Stranger Things than it
Yeah,
feels like The Lost Boys. I think. Um, but just if you look at it objectively as a product of 1987, this is a perfectly fine movie. Like I said, the only real drawback I have is like Jason Patrick gets overshadowed. He's the main character, and like you don't even realize he's the main character in the movie. He's like buried by everybody else in this movie.
yeah, because everything with the brother when he turns and he's dealing with his own issues, it's like it feels like it's a background plot line, but also at the forefront. Yeah, it's definitely a weird.
It's meant to be the main plot line, but it feels like a C storyline. And
Yeah,
yeah,
because Corey Feldman's character is just so not over the top, but like he's definitely he stands out. And
he's a
then
character.
yeah,
He is a
and then
character.
Kiefer Sutherland's not in it as much as you really would think about being like on the poster, but he definitely he's a standout. He's so memorable, and he is the guy for when you think of this movie. He is the guy that you think of. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's one of those where it's like, oh yeah, Kiefer Sutherland's not the main person; it's someone else. You know what I mean? And then
right.
yeah, so that definitely is understandable there. So what would you give this score? If I go out of 5 because I just letterbox what I use.
Yeah,
So I don't know if
Letterbox. I'd say that for me, just given like the fact that I really am only enjoying it from like a nostalgic standpoint, I'd probably go a solid 3.5 out of 5 for the Lost Boys.
all right, that's a lot lower than I would expected.
Hmm.
But it's closer to me then. So for me, it's a 3 out of 5. It's one of those on my rating scale. It's surfable experience. It does exactly what it's going for. And if you're going in for it as just a horror movie in the background, date movie, just a first time watch to check it off your box for bucket list of horror or whatever, boom, it checks all that and it does exactly what it needs to do. And no better, no worse. And I feel like you won't have a bad time doing it. It's one of those where it's like, oh yeah, I'll go back, in 2-3 years, give it another try or whatever like that.
Yeah,
So
I think you're right. It's like a good like a gate movie for like to get you into it, especially if you want to get into vampires and like you don't like Twilight. Then yeah, you should do The Lost Boys as your first film. Why not?
especially if Dracula and Nosferatu are too old and slow.
Yeah,
So it ramps it up just a little bit. So yeah, so Lost Boys, vampires. So the reason that we brought up the Lost Boys is because of your niche pick. You want to hit us with that title?
yeah. Like one of the movies I saw recently, and it just happens to be a vampire movie, but just so very well done. Is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. It was made in 2014. It was. Would you want to go over the specifics of it? I know that's your thing. Go ahead.
Well,
The,
yeah, all right. So yeah, I was gonna let you talk about it since it was yours, but yeah, since I have it popped up, it's
yeah,
got 96% of Rotten Tomatoes for critics. I'm surprised about that. It's only got 75% on audience score, so that makes a little more sense in terms of not being so well known. It only made 500,000, little under 600,000 worldwide. So I don't know if it had a theatrical release wide or like what its
limited.
deal
It
was.
was very limited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's one of those where it's like, if you don't know it, you don't know it. So this is why we talk about these things, and you can find it currently on AMC Plus if you have a Roku add-on, and if it's and you can watch like how I watch it on Tubi for free. You just have to get with the ads, but it is HD, and the ads aren't as long as IMDb TV with 3 different 1-minute ads, and so it's not so bad. So yeah, go ahead and now give us a rundown of what this movie is and why you wanted to talk about it today.
I feel it's, when I saw it, like I went into it expecting nothing. Honestly, if you hear somebody describe A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night to you, actually, I think Anna Liliamapur, who is it's her directorial debut, she describes it as an Iranian vampire western. So you hear those 3 words together, you're like, oh wow, that sounds like thoroughly unappealing to me. And the fact that it's shot in black and white and it's totally in Arabic. Also, if I describe that to you, I'm probably already turning off 99% of the people who are watching this podcast right now. But trust me, if you're going to watch one Iranian vampire western in black and white and totally in Arabic, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is the movie that you want to watch. This is a solid movie. It is. I hesitate to say, because it sounds weird coming out of my mouth, this movie is fucking beautiful. It is a beautiful movie, like bell to bell, a beautiful movie.
I will agree with that.
Yeah.
So how many have you only seen it the 1 or 2 times? I don't know if you rewatch it for this or if you just watched it so recently for the first time. So how many times have you seen it?
I've seen the movie 3 times, and like I plan to watch it again because I'm going to use it in. Spoiler alert! I'm using this in my trivia leagues. Everybody, come get at me. This is like, it's a great movie. I can watch this. Everybody I talk to about horror, like the first words out of my mouth are, "Have you seen A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night?" I believe in this movie that much.
That is true. You
Yeah.
definitely that's one of the first things you brought up with
Yeah.
me. So for me, my general thoughts, I didn't know that it was in black and white. That's a start. I knew it was foreign language because you mentioned that, but I didn't technically know. And I definitely, as soon as you described it as a Iranian vampire western, I was like, yeah, that's what that movie is. Like, that's exactly what it is. This feels as if this was a Jim Jarmusch vampire movie. Like it definitely has those vibes to it, and it is beautiful, and
Yeah.
it definitely has a vibe to it. So I'm gonna go into my dislikes now at this point, and that is I didn't really enjoy watching it. I don't. I'm yeah, I don't necessarily have a negative thing to say about it, other than the fact that I just didn't enjoy watching it the entire time. Like, I love foreign films. If you watch my top 100 there on the channel, you'll see that I have multiple foreign films on there, so it has nothing to do with that. Vampires technically aren't my bag. Like, I'm not really even big on like the popular ones, like What We Do in the Shadows. I've seen Nosferatu and Dracula. I didn't really care about those. Lost Boys, I'm middle of the road at best, and that's just because it's more fun and campy. So I think vampires just don't appeal to me as much because I just I never get that, like, so ironically, the praise I will give to like What We Do in the Shadows is that like weird cult thing that they have going on there, and I feel like that's the only time you can kind of vibe, or I can vibe with a vampire movie. It's because you're getting inside the mindset of like the struggles that they're dealing with, and the main girl has starts formulating a relationship with this guy, and it's one of those where it's like she doesn't want to get to him. Like, it's towards the end too, so it's like at that point you're already been meandering for a while. Not meandering, but it's Western style. You know what I mean? You've been John Wayning it for a little bit. So it's one of those where it's like I'm just like, where's it going? Where's it going? And once it gets to then, it's like it had. I don't really know how to describe it. Like, it felt like The Graduate at the end, where they're just sitting in the car.
Yeah. Okay. I give you that. Yeah.
And it's like, what do we do now? And it's like, all right, like I was like, I don't know how to feel about this. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I don't necessarily have a negative thing to say in terms of the filmmaking, the acting. I mean, it's an Iranian, so I don't know, in terms of like inflections of their voice and the way that they go about their, their dialogue in terms of like how well it is. But it didn't, at no point was I like, oh, that's bad. And then
all of them are American actors. Like all of them, like, are people that you'll see on TV. I think the majority of them do the majority of their work in America. This was shot in the United States. It wasn't shot like overseas.
Cool.
The director is actually from England. She just happens to be of Persian descent. Yeah, she just chose to do the movie in Arabic, so she just got a bunch of mostly American actors who just happen to be able to speak in Arabic to be in this movie. I think the only true Iranian actor is the lead is Arash, the guy that plays the main male character.
Yeah.
Everybody else had the one girl who plays Ati, the prostitute. She was on Blacklist for freaking 5 seasons.
Interesting.
And the other guy that plays his father is a character actor that's in a lot of stuff.
I guess another positive thing about it is the first, like, any time that she kind of like does the vampire seduction and kind of meets the people, and like when her teeth come out, and that just has a nice vibe to her. You're like, that's creepy. And then the one time when she met that kid, and then I'm pretty sure she asked, like, are you a good kid, or are you a good person, like something along those lines, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, it's one of those where it's like she's not just a villain per se. She's just doing what she needs to do, and she kind of like is like specific with her prey. So yeah, I don't know. It's just maybe I just didn't know what to expect. I don't know. Maybe
I don't
down
think
the
anybody
line.
knows what to expect going into this movie. I don't think anybody knows what to expect in this movie.
Yeah.
Even the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, this is what we're doing. And I just like, went with it. And then it all builds to that one scene when she takes him back to her apartment and he spins the disco ball, and Death by White Lies plays. Like, that's like, to me, that's like it for me. That was such a great scene. Like, nothing happens, no words are spoken.
Yeah.
Like the whole song plays, and it's just the two of them like interacting. It's a great scene.
Yeah, like I said, like all that stuff stands out in terms like I said, well shot. The facial like emotions, the way that they get, whether it's the fear, the confusion, or just her kind of like just being there. You know what I mean? It's a weird. It's similar to like Under the Skin with ScarJo, where it's like she kind of just going through the motions and stalking her prey, but being like specific and like kind of like easing it in there, and not just being a physical force in turn, but being more, I don't want to say mental per se, but it's more just subtle.
It's psychological.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's one of those where it definitely, that would be an interesting double feature with this one with that.
I think this is more derivative, and like it happened to be released after like Let the Right One In and Let Me In.
Yeah.
This is like derivative of that type of vampire movie, like where you have like a reclusive female vampire and like a a put upon male hero, and they just happen to have a relationship. Like I'm, looking at reviews of A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, no one really dares make that connection, but it's there to be made. Like, you could literally criticize this movie and just say like, oh yeah, it's just a ripoff of Let the Right One In, pretty much. It hits a lot of the same beats, but it's its own movie at the same time.
That is ironically that you mentioned that. So spoiler alert if we talk about it for a future episode. But that's another one where I haven't seen Let Me In yet, but Let the Right One In, I was underwhelmed. I don't know if I hyped myself up for so long because I've just heard such good things, and in comparison to the remake, how they both just really do a good job. So I was underwhelmed by that. So I really think I'm not a vampire person. So I feel like that's just not my bag in terms of horror, because it just doesn't do anything for me. So yeah, like I said, I don't have anything negative to say. I'm not mad at you for making me watch it. And I'm definitely not mad at you recommend it. I don't want to scare away any viewers of like, oh, this doesn't sound like something I would like. Obviously, figure it out for yourself. If you like No Country for Old Men meets Under the Skin, then you might directed by Jim Jarmusch, then you might have a fun time. And it's really specific in what it's going for. So, I mean,
what did you land on for like a Letterboxd score for this? I could take it. I'm a big boy.
I know. I'm thinking because since I didn't technically put one yet, because I didn't want to like because you follow me, I didn't want to like have it spoiled. But
that wouldn't have bothered me.
I know, but it was more of just for the conversation. I just wanted the anticipation. I'm probably gonna go 2. I'm probably gonna go 2 out of 5 just because of the odds of me rewatching it, aside from because you're my buddy and I would give it a second chance for you, are low. And like if since I don't do half stars, this would probably be like a 2.5. If I did did halves, like it's a higher 2. But since I don't currently do half stars, it's still going to be at a 2, just because by the end of it, I was essentially like, what's the point? And I feel like that really just kind of hits that, it just misses that serviceable experience. I really don't feel like it serviced what it was going for. I feel like it knew what it was doing, but it didn't service the point to me as an audience member. So yeah, where are you at with it?
No shock. This is a 5 out of 5 for me. Like, I do think maybe after like repeated viewings, it might slip down to like 4.5, 4. But right now, like just with it fresh in my mind and just like all the visuals and just the feeling I got watching this movie, I went into this movie just thinking, it's just a freaking indie horror movie. And like most indie horror movies, most direct, not that this wasn't direct to DVD, but a lot of indie horror is direct to DVD, and a lot of it is hot garbage. And you can either go into it thinking it's gonna be hot garbage or enjoying the fact that it's hot garbage. So the fact that 99% of the movies you're gonna watch are gonna be like hot garbage, I went into this with a distinct possibility that it might be hot garbage, but it was the exact opposite of hot garbage for me. So like the fact that like it hit me so hard, I was like, well, goddamn, like like this deserves all of my attention. And then, upon 2 rewatches, it still holds up. I still think that scene in the bedroom is fantastic. All the performances are solid. It's not gory. It's not even scary. Like I wouldn't say you will not be scared watching A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night unless you have a weird fear of vampires, like where you're just seeing them as in a scary.
You might feel creeped out technically, but you're not going to feel like scared. Like you're definitely not going to jolt or there's no jump scares. Like it's nothing like that.
All the kills, you see them coming. Like they're coming. And like worth noting, it is very difficult to get a cat to do anything. And the cat actor in this movie is the greatest cat actor you will ever see. Greatest aside from CGI Garfield, the greatest cat actor you will see.
Don't knock Ulysses in Inside Llewyn Davis, but we'll do a war room for best cat performance.
Best cat performances in movies, definitely.
So comment below if you've already seen this one, because this is probably the more interesting conversation in terms. Well, I guess this and our next one in terms of the next one's more topical, and then this one just more interesting in terms of I don't want to say random, but like niche, essentially what the show is. So comment below if you are more on the John side of if you've seen it, or if you're more with me. And if you haven't seen it, and comment below who's swayed you to either avoid it, me, or not one. I don't even want to say avoid it though. That's the bad thing. But if John's going to make you want to watch it tonight per se. So going into our I don't want to say the main topic, because the main topic technically was Girl Walks Home at Night, but so our mainstream movie that's a new release, well, I guess just a new release movie, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
All right. So this is a Netflix release, so obviously that's we'll start there. You can watch this on Netflix. There's not really going to be any stats for it in terms of like box office, since it is Netflix. I'm going to check to see what its Rotten Tomato score is, to see where we're lying on that, my guy. And 34% critics and 28% audience.
That low. All right, let's get into this. I have thoughts on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's fresh in my mind.
All right, so I'll let you start, since it's fresh on your mind. With for these ones, for the mainstream ones, I feel like we can just riff back and forth, and we don't need to be as strict as avoid spoilers just because it's fresh. But I'm not
going to spoil anything, but I will talk about a lot of the stuff that happens in this movie, because my one big criticism of Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
it doesn't need to exist.
2022. No, I think what they're doing is good. I think the overall feel is good. They just tried to cram so much like topical stuff into this movie that did not need to be there. Like you didn't need to have one of the characters survive a school shooting. You didn't need to have the whole like, is gentrification cool? Like feel to the movie. Like you didn't need a lot of that stuff. That being said, like I forgive a lot of that stuff, because literally, and also, this is Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of has that whole Halloween curse to it, like where like there's like so many timelines. If you go throughout all the movies, like which way are you supposed to go? So technically,
halfway through, I didn't know that this was a continuation. I literally thought it was a remake at this point, and I was really confused. So I do agree with that. Where it's like I don't know. Yeah, it's 50 years after the original, so I guess
it's a requel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
So you can either look at it like the only movies you need to watch are Texas Chainsaw. You can watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 75 and then jump into this, or you can watch this and then watch 75 as a prequel to kind of get the backstory of the movie. And then at that point, if you're a fan of the franchise, you can try to figure out which movies are canon and which movies aren't, which is going to be extremely hard to do at this point. But I clearly think, again, without spoiling anything, like Netflix and I guess Fede Alvarez and all these people that have their hands in the pot they're looking to make something out of this. They're looking to, I don't know if they're looking to go series or they're looking to go like a series of movies, but there's definitely going to be at least one more of these coming out.
Yeah. like we keep saying, not getting into spoilers, but the way it ends, it's like okay. I'll leave it at that. That was a choice.
I
So my
felt predictable. I felt that was you can go to the one thing about this movie that is negative is everything is thoroughly predictable. But go
yeah.
ahead.
So that I think that's my point of like, at no point did this movie do anything that warrants its existence, because like I'm a huge fan of the 2003 remake. Like that is arguably one of my, favorites, probably one of my top 2 or 3 favorite remakes in horror. It's one of those where it's rewatchable because there's so much, memorability with R. Lee Ermey. There's nothing that there in this movie. You don't, or at least I don't care about any of the main characters, because the whole activist plot line that you got with the main girl, and then the younger sister with her PTSD of the school shooting. Which, if you want to throw that in there, that's fine. But like, have it be more than other than, oh, this is redemption for her surviving potentially a Texas Chainsaw. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's not saying anything other than like, oh, if she survived once, she could survive again. Like, that's because in reality, in both cases, it would be luck. You know what I mean? Because nothing about her character is badass. I mean, she tries here and there to do some stuff, you know what I mean? But it doesn't, there's just nothing that warrants, like, it's literally like, I'm not going to remember specifically anything tomorrow, or like when this is out of the mind. Like the bus scene, when I watched a review, someone mentions the bus scene, and it's one of those where I don't know if that hyped it up for me, because I'm like, oh, it's gonna be super cool. It was fine, I mean, it's essentially what exactly you expect when you enter a bus in this type of movie, and the 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 first Leatherface scenario is just so weird. Like, I don't want to go into spoilers, but
Yeah.
like, there's nothing in my mind, especially given the backstory of like who Leatherface is with all of his family members, and how quote unquote close the family is and all troubled they are, but no matter what, they got each other's back. So for him to do what he does, I don't know, it just felt out of place. Like, it just doesn't, like, I'm not a huge Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, because I've only seen the first one and then the first 2 of the remakes. So it's like I've only seen 3, but I really like those 3. You know what I mean? So it's like it's just, I don't know. It just bummed me out that I feel like it just didn't warrant its existence. How do you feel about my thoughts on that stuff?
Yeah, I honestly, it's the more I think about Texas Chainsaw, this 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's a ton of negatives about this movie. However, like, I'm forgiving a lot with this movie. I would say, if you're just a fan of like that whole, like, Friday remake, the 2009 Friday remake, or like the Hatchet series, or just anything like Hills Have Eyes, like that is where they went with this. That is where it is. Like, they've turned Leatherface into one of these, like,
Yeah.
let's have iconic kills, let's have creative kills, let's do this, let's do this. Whereas, the original Texas Chainsaw, it was just like, boom, dead, meat hook, boom, like, it was all and that the quickness and brutality of the 75 Texas Chainsaw Massacre is what made that so, like, unsettling.
This movie didn't feel dirty either. Like,
Yeah.
it felt like a dusty town, but not a dirty town, and I
Right.
really feel like that's what adds to this
This
series.
it's an abandoned town. It's just an
Yeah.
abandoned ghost town.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of dirtiness, like, in the house, and there's definitely one scene that is absolutely filthy. But we won't, no spoilers.
Talking about the pipe, where
Yeah, we cuts the pipe. Yeah, 100%. We cuts that pipe. That is. I was like, oh, we're going there too. All right, there we go. Like,
okay.
But yeah, there's this movie is brutal. But again, Fede Alvarez is involved, so that was gonna happen. Like, if you saw the Evil Dead remake, you know where this is going. So if you watch the Evil Dead remake, and you not so much Don't Breathe, but if you watch the Evil Dead remake and you saw the direction he took that in, that is the direction that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is now going in, and there's more to come.
I agree with you in a sense, but because Fede didn't direct this, he was just a producer, so he probably gave some notes in terms of
He
like.
wrote it too.
Oh, he did write it?
He's one of the screenwriters. Yes, that's I said his fingerprints are like all over.
Okay.
Yeah, and the guy that he's a first time. Well, he's not a first time director, but he's a cinematographer. David Blue Garcia, whatever his name is. So he has very little experience. So I guarantee Fede Alvarez was like more involved than they're letting on.
I think probably because I don't know why they would do that, but yeah, it's one of those where it's like, given like without getting into Evil Dead, because it's not about that. The backstory with the main girl in Evil Dead, in comparison to the backstory in the main girl here, it just feels like I am going to remember that the backstory of the girl in Evil Dead. Even
Oh
I've
yeah.
only seen it one time, and I saw it 3 or 4 years ago, and I vividly remember it because it's really a prominent part of the story. This one, it's literally just there just to add, you know, depth that there is no depth to its attempt at depth. So it's just I don't know. It's just one of those where it's just like,
Well,
eh.
the only counter I would make to that is like if you look at the 1975 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, none of those characters had any depth either.
Yeah,
And
but
you
in
think it's
there though,
it's similar.
but the difference between and that's a good example, but the difference in that is with that movie, its originality sets its stamp in the genre that it's going for, and the vibe with the dirtiness, with the setting on the old dusty road, the abandoned house and the family. You know what I mean? It really sets the originality and just the newness of what it's going for. So this one, especially years after so many of this specific style of movie, let alone within the franchise, it needs to add something to say. I just talking about the new Scream movie where it's like, if you're going to make another one, you need to have something to say, and that's a perfect example. It's got something to say. It's it goes within the contents of the franchise and the themes and the beats that these types of movies hit, while still adding something. Whereas this one, it hits the beats, but it's like when your little brother's watching you do an activity, and they're just reenacting what you're doing. They're technically doing what you're doing, but it's not the same, and it's not as good. You know what I mean? It's one of those, and I feel like that was this case. Like this is
This was like
literally.
listening to the Jock Jam CD. It's like, oh, we're gonna play Rock and Roll Part One. Here we go. Yeah, there it is. Everything was like, I was literally watching. I was like, this is gonna happen.
Yep.
And this is gonna happen.
Yep.
All the way up to the last second.
This is the cover band.
Yeah.
This is a cover band remake. Then I feel like I'm going to stamp that. Get this. That's what these remakes are. That's how we're gonna describe these. This is a cover band remake. It technically doesn't do anything bad. It's just doing everything that you expect, and you're just gonna want the original. You know what I mean? And that's a shame, because like you said, the kills are brutal, heads coming off, going through shoulders, doing all that type of stuff, going through bodies. But it's like, at the end of the day, you could find that other places and still, you know what I mean? And it's just missing something for me. So is there anything else specifically that you got on this Texas Chainsaw? Because you said you can go for hours. Is there any like main things that
like everything I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff shoehorned in here, and since we're not spoiling, I really can't go too deep into
Yeah, that's fair.
So but they shoehorn like a lot of social commentary into this movie. There's even like jokes about like social media in this movie.
I will admit that on the bus scene, that is definitely probably a reason why this isn't even lower, which is saying something. But yeah, that scene where there's a scene on the bus where there's live and people are commenting, is this fake? That looks so fake. How do I get there? That looks so much fun. And it's like, oh my God, because the internet is so stupid. And that was a fun, joke, but with 2 seconds in a
I feel like they felt they needed to do everything they did, and they could have done more with so much less in this movie.
Yeah.
And that's like the real failing of it. I still had a good time watching it. I got to admit, it was fun. I had fun watching it. But that's just because like that subgenre of like over the top gore. How do I top this? If you're into that, you will like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you're going into it expecting these directors to respect Tobe Hooper, you will hate this movie.
Yeah. Especially because it's saying, hey, this is a direct sequel to that. It's like, yeah. What are we doing?
I'm not even going to give away like the biggest plot point that I haven't mentioned yet, but there is a very, very big part of the story that is elaborated on from the first movie that you're gonna be like, that's an interesting direction they took, and they do absolutely shit all with it. So that's also like a slap in the face. But there's more to come, so I'm buckling in.
Yeah. So without getting into spoilers, when that happened, I was like, okay, they are referentiating other movies that do similar things. And I feel like it wasn't slapping Texas Chainsaw in the face. I feel like it was slapping those movies in the face by using this beat.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I might give a little bit because you that just clicked right now of like, it's like, all right, maybe it's smarter than it, like, it's probably, it's one of those things that just goes over your head because you're not thinking of it. You're thinking it's lazy. And I feel like it might actually be smarter because you don't realize that that's what it's doing. It's like a 21 Jump Street joke where it's like, yeah, we're going to do exactly what we're making fun of. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like, okay, so maybe, and I might be stretching. I might be just in a good mood right now. So I'm just
yeah.
giving it a little leeway, but,
Yeah, I guess my main complaint, and like the more I think about it, the more this thing drops in my head. Like they do a lot.
yeah.
Like all your familiar horror movie tropes are in there. They're there. Believe me. Like I'm gonna try to escape, but this is gonna go wrong. I'm gonna try to escape again, but this is gonna go wrong. And they do it like twice as much as everything that happens twice as much as it needs to happen in this movie.
I think the other thing is like the difference between like even the original, like you set up the original with all those kids, teenagers, whatever the age they were in that van, and you're
Yeah.
just getting to know them and you're like vibing with them, similar like in Cabin in the Woods and all that stuff, where it's like
Mhm.
it's building up these characters, so you don't need to necessarily know their backstory or the nooks and crannies of who they are as people, but you're getting the vibe. This, you just don't have that. Like I said, it throws in this activism plot that,
Yeah.
or like whatever they're trying to do, but you don't
They're
really.
trying to create. I mean, this isn't a plot point. There's two chefs.
Yeah.
The one chef has a fiance, ooh, and the other chef brings her sister, and they're trying to create like a culinary utopia in some abandoned ghost town in Texas.
Yeah, and it's
It's
like,
like, and if I describe that to you, you'd be like, well, what the fuck is this movie? It sounds so stupid. And saying it out loud, it's dropping again in my head. This movie. Yeah.
I'm happy we talked it out because
Yeah.
the fact that you said you had fun and you didn't
I did
hate
have
it.
fun though. I had fun.
I'm so,
But I
I'm,
had
I'm,
fun watching. I would have fun watching, like my son fall down a flight of stairs too. That would be a horrible thing to say. Is funny.
I would rather watch your son fall down the stairs than this movie again.
Yeah.
I give it 1 star, man. Oh god, I did not like this movie at all.
I think I'm settling on like 2.5, only because like there's great practical effects in this movie, and that's it. There's great practical effects in this movie.
So if
And
you are such a diehard horror fan, because one other
Yeah.
person that I follow on Letterboxd gave it a 4-star review, and literally they in someone commented was like, "Oh, I'm going in with a tempered expectation." They're like, "If you like this type of shit, you're gonna like it. If you don't, then you're not." And it's
Yeah.
literally it's made for horror fans of this specific genre that are okay from like years of this style, though, not just like new, like, because we're spoiled with the different type of horror that we're getting now.
Yeah,
So
I think critically dissecting the movie, I have to give it a 2.5 stars. But like, if I went into it like, yeah, I'm gonna go into a movie, I'm gonna go and watch Hatchet, I'm gonna watch Hills Have Eyes, and I'm gonna watch the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Then in that company, I'm gonna give it like 4. But by
I
itself,
like the New Hills Have Eyes, so that's not, yeah, I can't
by itself as a standalone movie, there's a lot wrong with this movie, a lot. And like, yeah, and talking it out, like I feel insulted now. I didn't feel insulted when I first started talking about it, but now I feel like this was insulting.
going into this night. Where were you? You said it's gone down, so where were you thinking you were gonna settle until you
I started at a solid 4, just because like I appreciated like the effort. I appreciated like what they were trying to do. I can definitely see that they're trying to make a real. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't do like a limited, like 10 episode series for this on Netflix. I have a feeling that's the direction they're going. I think they're trying to do what they did with Chucky on USA Network. They're trying to make a Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. I guarantee that's what's happening because that is what they're setting up. So given that, I want to like it because like then you're gonna have to refer back to this. But the more you think about it, with like all the choices they made with the characters, all the choices they made with the plot, all the choices they made with like where it fits in the canon of the series, it's really they were bad risks. I think they were bad risks they took.
Yeah, that's a good example. Similar with what that's another good example. Just bringing up that the new Chucky with the Child's Play, where it's like it took a risk of making it AI, and at least it's memorable. Whether you accept it or not, you like the design, all that stuff. It's still memorable because it still has all the classic kills and the crazy stuff. but it's also got, like Mark Hamill's voice. Like I said, this one just doesn't have anything that's going to make me when I close my eyes and think of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, other than thinking of the bottom of my list, this is not going to come up. You know what I mean? I'm going to think of R. Lee Ermey in 2003. I'm going to think of the iconic originality of the first one. I'm even going to think of in the beginning, just the weird family takeover aspect of that prequel. You know what I mean? Like there's element. I mean, obviously that's R. Lee Ermey again, so it's kind of cheating. But you know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like it still is going to have that standout, and this just does not have it for me personally. And I feel bad because I don't hate eighth grade. Like I like eighth grade, so I like Elsie Fisher like as an actress, and I was rooting. I'm like, oh yeah, look, here you go, getting the lead. And it's like,
yeah, I hear that. And like I say, it's the Chucky TV series I'm comparing it to, not the. I actually with the Child's Play series. Maybe we'll get into this in another episode. Like I think Child's Play, the new one, is really just standalone. It's basically like its own movie. Like,
yeah,
I don't even see it as part of like the other canon.
that is definitely
because the first all the Bride, Seed, Curse, Cult goes into the TV series, and then the new one is a standalone.
Okay, I haven't seen the show, so I wasn't sure exactly. Yeah, but that's fair. And I'm always down to talk Chucky because those are still fresh in my mind in terms of watching those. But yeah. So do you have what's your recommendation? I don't know if you have off the red. I don't know if the pressure's there. Well, if not, we'll do it behind the scenes. But do you have a one ready that you want to tease for next week, or is that one of those that we still?
I think we can talk about what the theme is going to be for next week because I do have a theme picked out. I want to kind of start touching on like body horror. Like there's like a lot of body horror movies out there. So I think we're going to do next week. There's a very iconic body horror movie, which I think a lot of people claim is the start of the body horror like subgenre. And then I've picked a niche movie that also is actually it's more similar to the movie we're going to pick than Lost Boys and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. These movies are definitely going to be more similar for next week. Promise. Then we'll find another new release, which I don't know what that's going to be, unless you can think of a new release we should watch.
I'll look it up. It'll be something that's coming out, or it could be, I don't know if The Cursed is still in theaters. So I missed it, so I didn't watch it yet. That new werewolf movie, but like there's possibilities. We'll figure something out. So yeah, that was episode 1 of There Will Be Horror. Yeah, I don't know if this point, where I'm going to grow and what I'm going to learn as a horror fan from you, but I do know that just discussing this and like figuring out what appeals to me. Like I think I sent you my list, and maybe I didn't send you my top just to give you an idea of where I'm at. But I know I like my horror, but it's definitely not the cliche stuff, but it's also not the over the top elevated stuff. Like I mean the middle. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely willing to step outside the box and learn from you and get these recommendations. And I'm just gonna love having this conversation because I feel like we can definitely add different mindsets and different concepts of what we think horror fans should look at. And so yeah, there's our niche picks, or there was our mainstream, our niche, and our new release: The Lost Boys, Girl Walks Home at Night, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If I had to rank the 3, my number 1 would ironically be The Lost Boys. Number 2 would be Girl Walks Home at Night, and then number 3 by a mile is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I would guess you flip.
I've flipped the top 2, and that's where we're at. Definitely Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Slowly drowned throughout this conversation. No spoilers in the movie. There's definitely no drowning in the movie.
There's drowning and gore, but
yeah.
That's more of just a plot stuff. I mean, practical, effects in gore. But yeah. So with that said, if you made it this far in the video, you probably liked it, so you might as well drop a like on the video. If you clicked on you just clicked horror, movies, horror, and all that stuff, and you watch this entire thing, subscribe to the channel because this is the new podcast we're going to be doing weekly, bi-weekly. I don't know exactly, but we'll figure out the dates and all that. But I also have another show on here called Let's Rank Stuff, where me and my co-host Austin Pessow, where we just rank franchises and filmographies of directors, and we kind of have a lot of fun there. We also do trivia on here, where John is a very reoccurring teammate and member there. And then I started up the War Room, where we have debates, and it's more exposition style, like the old school movie fights. Maybe we'll have a belt in there, but it's not a league. It's more of just kind of like show up and play, and if you play enough, you win enough, and all that stuff. So yeah, that's what everything that we're doing on the channel right now. We're having a blast. We're really building up a small little community over here, and we're having some fun. So my name is Henry Confidential. That is John DeMayer.
Yeah.
And this is There'll Be Horror. So yeah,
like and subscribe. What are you waiting for? Like and subscribe. Go to the
I, di- I
Facebook
didn't I
page.
didn't I didn't
Go to
add
the Facebook
the
page.
I didn't add the thing on there. So
We got to plug that stuff.
there we go. I had to switch over. It's on the other one. I made a
Yeah.
new one for this show. There we go. Like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And then there's the Facebook group. Yeah, it was on the other one because I built a pre thing for this. So with that said, my name's Henry Confidential. That is John Marr, and we will see you next week or the week after, whenever we do this again. But we will definitely see you again. Bye, guys.
Bye.